Fallout 3 offers tons of weapons, armors, and consumables to aid you on your journey across the wasteland to complete quests and slay enemies. But what if you weren't allowed to use any of that? What if you had to keep your carry weight at the bare minimum? Could you still beat the game? Well, that brings me to today's question. Can you beat Fallout 3 with no equip load? The rules are simple. As long as the item weighs nothing, it's allowed to be used. But as an added bonus, I won't be allowed to use stim packs or Radaway to assist me. Anything outside of that, even for transportation reasons, is off limits. Now, during the run, I asked the community what they thought about glitches being allowed in the run, and it seemed like most people were okay with them being used. But I know there are some sticklers out there, so this video actually has two different versions of the run. So if you prefer your challenges glitchless, there's options for that inside here as well. But that's enough talking. Without further ado, let's get into the run. The run starts off as any other, with us creating some kind of gobbledygook character, and then our mom takes the easy way out of the challenge. Fast forward to our first birthday, and it's time to set the stats. Strength and Perception are both dump stats because we're not going to be carrying anything anyway. Endurance is an easy 10 because we're going to have to take a ton of damage throughout the run. Charisma got bumped up to a 6, mainly for some late game perks that never got utilized on the glitchless run. Intelligence at 10 for the most amount of skill points we could get per level up. Agility at 2 because I had one extra point that I didn't know what to do with. And luck also got bumped up to a 10 because after doing some research, I found out that fist damage, which is basically the main damage source of the run, isn't affected by strength at all, but rather calculated via a high endurance and a high luck stat. Who would have guessed? Now with the stats set for the run, it was time to make the great escape. And to no one's surprise, if you want to play with absolutely no equip load, the easiest way to start that is by taking the shortest route out of the vault, plunging into the abyss and then trying to navigate a vault by touch and feel because you have no quest markers and only play Fallout 3 once every 6 months. However, if you want a more leisurely adventure, after you set your stats, you can enjoy playing with your toys, as from here on out, we won't get a second chance. When your dad comes in to say hello, instead of telling him that you'd rather be with mom and that he never has anything fun to do when you guys hang out, just crawl on the dirty floor after him and then wind up at your 10th birthday party. But immediately take off everything, because you just happen to be the one weird kid in the entire vault, and you have to make a statement. But now you can immediately start harassing your party guests. And for some strange reason, after seeing you do this, your dad decides that the next best thing is to give you a BB gun and tell you to murder a small animal in the basement. But at least he got to take a photo with the big game hunter. Now that you're 16, it's time for you to take a test that'll determine what you do for the rest of your life. And basically do a repeat of your 10th birthday party, except where you were harassing people with verbal abuse, now you get to knock out greaser wannabes. Only for one of them to wake up 10 minutes after starting the most important test of their lives. But hey, at least you got the best results you could, right? Now making it to 19, and to no one's surprise, your dad began his midlife crisis and decided that parenthood wasn't super groovy. And for some strange reason, the first thing that you decided to do was check in on your bitter rival's mother. You had arrived too late and there was nothing you could do to help her. But for some reason, her kid showed up with a shotgun and tried to kill you, and things kinda got out of hand. From there, you pretty much had a 5-star wanted level, and everyone had to catch a fair serving. I mean, I nearly gained an entire level just from beating up everything that walked in Vault 101. But making it outside, the automatic level up happened, and Black Widow is chosen for the first perk, and all the points were dumped into unarmed. Now, to no one's surprise, first things first, we were heading to Megaton, but for two very different reasons. On our baby glitch run, our first order of business is talking to Lucas Sims, because he for some reason bestows the ability to actually perform basic tasks. Think of this kind of like how Skyrim has you start out with your hands bound and you have to wait for either the Imperial or the Stormcloak to cut you free. Yeah, this is basically Fallout 3's version. Now that we can properly play the game, our next order of business is going up to the saloon and breaking into everything so we can find the password for Moriarty's computer terminal to figure out exactly where our misbegotten father went. Because for most of this run, I'm going to be relying on quest markers to get us from point A to point B. However, on our glitchless run, we still go to Megaton, but for a completely different reason. And to be 100% honest with you, now that I look back on this, I'm not even sure what the reason of doing this was. But, it's not my problem. We don't have a karma restriction for the run. Now moving back over to the glitched run, it was now time to make the journey to the Galaxy News Radio. And for anyone looking at potentially giving this a try, please don't. I found out very early on that regardless of how I set my stats in the beginning, from here on out, every single fight against anything would damn near kill me. I mean, look at me fighting a vicious dog. Look at how much health I lose. Sadly though, this was in the open world where I had lots of room to maneuver around fights. The metro I was going into was not as kind. But I did eventually make it to the Brotherhood of Steel, who were very generous with escorting me to the GNR building. It sucks they had to fight a behemoth on my behalf. Sorry guys, I really wish I could help here, but my hands are tied. Inside GNR, I met with 3Dog and immediately realized that I was gonna have to go set up a satellite dish in a war zone surrounded by super mutants. And I'll be honest with you, with the slow speed and no ability to heal other than drinking water, I was not excited about that. So you can only imagine how happy I was when I found out that I had a speech check to skip that quest. But in doing so, I found out where Rivet City was, which is awesome because I'm going to be going there a lot. The downside is that it meant I had to rerun through that metro tunnel again. But after a long journey, I made it to Rivet City and talked with Dr. Lee. She told me about Project Purity over in the Jefferson Memorial, but to get to that, I had to fight through super mutants. And if you thought this build could take on more than one ranged enemy at a time, you were sadly mistaken. But as if Todd Howard was taking pity on me, in came the blessing of Crazy Wolfgang. And if you want to fight fire with fire, send a gun-toting caravan worker to fight your battles for you. With the super mutants cleared outside, I was able to move into the Jefferson Memorial, only to have to fight more super mutants. But one thing to point out when you get up close and personal to someone with this particular setup is they're very prone to miss their shots, which is fantastic because when they do hit you, it feels like you've been hit for twice the amount of damage it's supposed to. Not only that though, but sometimes the enemies will just sprint backwards, gaining so much distance between you and them that there's really nothing you can do but get shot in the face. Good thing this place had a lot of sinks I could drink out of. Because when in doubt, drown your sorrows out in a radiated sink. But with the massive enemies taken care of, when it came time to actually progressing the quest, I couldn't reach the holotape that had details on my father's whereabouts. And even if I could grab it, I couldn't actually open it inside the Pip-Boy. Because that's another thing I'm going to have to deal with in this run. It's the lack of navigation and a lack of quest progression. It's a good thing I've played this game before and have an inkling of where to go next. So now came the long journey to Smith Casey's garage and have the run speed of a disabled sloth or the health of a half-eaten fish. It wouldn't have been such an issue, and maybe if I wasn't trying to navigate via a map multiplied by a kajillion on top of fighting hordes of small creatures made out to look like Godzilla's offspring, it could have been a nice hike. But hey, at least I found a cool alien weapon that I couldn't use. But after 45 long minutes of walking, I did eventually find Smith Casey's garage, only for Todd Howard to strike me down. I love this game. But after finally making it inside the garage, I was greeted by two of the scariest guard dogs I've ever seen. After being bullied enough times by mole rats, it was time to try a different approach. So I went back to Megaton and stole enough stuff to pay for the most expensive full heal I could find, to then return back to sprint past the mole rats because there's no point in me trying to fight them. However, the biggest saving grace here, because instead of just 2 mole rats, there's actually 4, was that they couldn't open doors. So all I had to do was put a little bit of distance between us and slam a door in their face, just like an angsty teen to their parent that just took away the Nintendo Switch. But now making it inside the vault, another problem presented itself. When you come here, you have to put on a Vault 112 suit to actually allow you into Tranquility Lane to chase down your father. And even though it's a mandatory quest item, for some reason my brain told me that since suits have weight, this was a no-go. However, because of the fact that it is a mandatory item, when you first approach the vault, a robot harasses you and gives it to you. So I had to find a way to dodge around the robot to make sure that the challenge was still met. Which was a lot easier than I thought, because since the robot is programmed to come up to you when you approach it, all I had to do was go back down the hallway and wait for it to come out to allow me to slip past it. Easy peasy. But now that I was in the vault, another problem arose, because you can't actually get into Tranquility Lane unless you're wearing the vault suit, and for the challenge's sake, I wasn't allowed to do that. I even tried to put it on, but because the Pip-Boy was practically useless this entire run, I couldn't even do that if I wanted to. But if you're doing this glitchless, then you can do this entire section normal, because for one, you punch way harder as an adult, and even though you hate wearing clothes, you don't mind putting on some new drip to get your brain melted. Now inside the hellscape of the 1950s, you can just break into a house and start working on your mixtape before the Chinese military storms in and kills all your potential fans. How the hell is anyone supposed to start a rap career like this? Now leaving Tranquility Lane, you can meet up with your dad, who immediately runs away because he's been stuck with you for 19 years and he's not sticking around any more than he has to. Meeting back up in Rivet City, you get a gang of scientists to roll with you over to the Jefferson Memorial to wait outside while you go inside and show the super mutants how many punches it takes to get to the center of their brains. But just as everything was going well, and skipping the mindless running around as a handy woman because who wants to see that, you make it back to your dad, only to find out he was having a private hotbox session and everyone got so high, they died. But unlucky for you, one of the people that died happened to be Colonel Autumn of the Enclave, and now the entire military was after you. Except, as an adult, when your problems get too hard to deal with, you can always just punch your way out of things, because the Enclave were dropping faster than my paycheck on a Friday when ordering pizza, which blows my mind, because mole rats took longer to take down than guys with energy weapons wearing full suits of armor. With the Enclave sorted out, now we had to lead a group of scientists through the sewers. Except just like every single sewer in every game ever created now and in the future, the sewers happen to be filled with baddies. Luckily, I could use the scientist human shields I was given as a distraction to take down the feral ghouls. Making it out of the sewers, we arrived at the Citadel, and the Brotherhood were nice enough to point me to Vault 87 where I could continue the main story. And here is another one of those majorly different branching paths. On the glitchless version, it's as simple as making it to Little Lamplight, using the Child at Heart perk to get Mayor McCready to open the gate for you, and then sprinting past the super mutants hanging out in Murder Pass to get to Vault 87. But in our current true no-equip load run, we still make it to Little Lamplight and talk our way using the same perk, but because the main story wasn't progressed far enough, Mayor McCready will never open the gate to Murder Pass for us. But of course that wasn't going to stop me from trying. See, when you first arrive in Little Lamplight, one of the older kids named Sticky is being kicked out and sent to Big Town, except because I only play Fallout 3 every couple of months, I thought Big Town was Paradise Falls. So in my hubris, I agreed to escort Sticky all the way to Big Town. And let me tell you, there was no way in hell we were ever going to make that trip in one piece. I mean, my man Sticky got eaten by rad scorpions shortly into the run, and then I spent the entire time being chased by every kind of enemy you could think of. Only to be hit with the realization that once I got to Big Town, it had like 6 NPCs and none of them were the ones that I thought I needed. Because like I said, I wanted to go to Paradise Falls because there's a couple of children's slaves you can purchase, and one of those children happened to be the sister of Joseph in Little Lamplight, and by doing him this solid, he could repair a terminal to allow a different way into Vault 87, skipping Murder Pass entirely. I did eventually make it to Paradise Falls, only to then be hit with the bouncer asking me for 500 caps up front, or to do a mission for him chasing down runaways using a special gun that, of course, had weight to it. At the moment, I couldn't do either one of those options, but I did have a way that I could make some money. And if you guessed fighting everything that had a health bar for their caps and weightless goods, you've watched too many of my videos and know how my brain works. But there's a much faster way to get 500 caps. See, the glitchless run did this in the first hour of the run. I made my way back to Megaton and convinced Mr. Burke to pay me the 1,000 caps to rig the bomb in the center of town to explode, and then made the long trek to Tenpenny Tower. Thankfully, this is a giant-ass tower you could practically see from anywhere on the map, so finding it wasn't too hard. Although watching an explosion as a baby is kind of lame, so here's the same explosion from the adult perspective. Except again, I don't know why I did this in the adult glitchless run, because I never needed the money or needed the experience. Oh well, if I wasn't going to do it, some other poor guy would have. But even after nuking an entire city of maybe sorta kinda potential innocent people, when I returned back to Paradise Falls, it turns out that I didn't even need the money anyway. Apparently I was so evil that the people knew who I was and would just let me in. Which is awesome because I get to keep my money, but not great because that was a very out-of-the-way hike I had to do. Anyway, now that I was inside Paradise Falls, it was time to procure some captive young peoples. Which, when talking with Eulogy Jones and asking for their price, he wanted a whopping 2,000 caps, which was obviously way too much, considering how much food I'm going to have to feed them, and toilet training is going to be a nightmare. But luckily, being able to persuade him down to 1,200 caps, I had just enough to foot the bill, and therefore the children now belong to me. Only 1 year old, and I've already blown up an entire town and purchased slaves. This child will be a menace by the time they're 20. But to no one's surprise, when I headed back to Little Lamplight and returned everyone to their rightful place, and exhausting all the dialogue that Joseph had, it turns out that again, without progressing the main story, even if I did all this running around for Little Lamplight, there was no way in hell these guys were going to help me get into Murder Pass. So I did the next best thing. I glitched through the gates, because if they're not going to help me, then I'll just have to bend the laws of physics to my whim to get what I want. But as I've stated before, fighting multiple ranged enemies is an absolute mess. On top of that, when you add melee enemies into the mix, essentially you're being shot at while being chased down by a super mutant holding a board with a rusty nail in it. And even though the range guys miss a lot because of your small size, melee people and the risk of tetanus do not have the same problem. And since they have a running attack that makes them move at the speed of a crackhead aiming for the next fix, there was no escaping it, so I just had to soak up as much damage as possible while hanging close to the wall to hopefully make the AI bump into something to at least give me a little bit of room to maneuver. But making it inside the vault didn't prove much better. For starters, I had to deal with a whole bunch of super mutants pressed real tightly together like some kind of mutated orgy, and somehow, some way, if I didn't die to that, then I had to run past brutes with assault rifles that turned my small frame into Swiss fucking cheese. And I won't lie, because of how little damage I was dealing, I genuinely thought this is where the run was going to end. Except since paying 1,200 caps for 3 shitty kids that didn't actually do anything for me seemed pretty pointless, what if I took that same amount of money and just invested it into a different stock? One that could actually assist me in combat? That's where Clover comes in. One of Eulogy Jones's bodyguards that wields a double-barrel shotgun, and according to the man himself, she's incredibly loyal to whoever holds her leash. Being able to clip through the gate proved really useful because as soon as I made it into the next area, and since companions teleport to your location with or without quest progression, Clover started laying waste to every single super mutant in the vicinity, because for some reason, they still aggroed onto me, and since they had a better chance of missing me than Clover, she basically just sat there with no issue shooting them point blank. Best distraction ever. This exact same thing continued all throughout Vault 87, which is fine with me because with all the super mutants cleared out, there were plenty of bedrolls and sinks to refill my health. And once we met up with Fox later in, between those two, the rest of the super mutants never stood a chance. Fox agreed to go get the Gek for me because I did him a solid, and because it's a mandatory quest item that you need to complete the game, it doesn't have a carry weight associated with it, which meant I was still at 0 equip load. Now, if you're doing this glitchless, you do so much more damage than I did by this point that you basically can take on 3 super mutants at the exact same time and win. Plus, with how many sinks and bedrolls there are, you never have to stress about your health. On top of that, you get to skip the slave trade altogether, so it cuts a ton of time out. The end of Vault 87 is basically tick for tack, and in about 15 minutes you've accomplished what took the glitched version a couple of hours. Now that I had the Gek in hand, both runs got abducted by Colonel Autumn, who somehow survived shitting his pants during the hotbox, and then they both went and told a presidential computer to commit die. Cue one long Michael Bay hallway scene, and after making it outside, both runs watched as Raven Rock blew to smithereens. Now came the glitchless run heading back to the Citadel to rally the Brotherhood in their discount Optimus Prime, and got to take the most stressful walk ever. Because this giant robot wasn't killing things quick enough, and the Brotherhood were more keen to shoot me in the back with literally no enemies in sight than wait one more second to find an Enclave soldier. Making it back to the Jefferson Memorial, Lions pretty much took care of everything inside, and when it came to end of the run, I just waltzed in and took one for the team. But what about the glitched run? How did that end? Well, I couldn't watch Liberty Prime take out the Enclave because the Citadel wasn't open to me, so I just went to the Jefferson Memorial, ran past all the enemies to the Rotunda, and clipped into the final room. Colonel Autumn was here and nice enough to hang out with me, but talking to him caused a fistfight to break out. Luckily, he wasn't too difficult to take down as he was the only one here, but now the biggest issue of the run presented itself. Even with Colonel Autumn not attacking me from being knocked out and scared for a repeat smack, I couldn't reach the buttons to end the game. But your boy found out something absolutely bananas. Inside this room is a hot plate that cannot be reached normally. I found out that by clipping behind the main terminal in an attempt to gain some height, I was just barely able to grab the hot plate and dragged it out into the front of the terminal. I tried to stand on it only to find out that the game just clips you through the object. Damn. But because I didn't want to end the run on a downer, I tried clipping into everything I could, only to find out that if you position the hot plate just right behind the machine and try to clip out with the hot plate in your way, for some reason it pushes you on top of the hot plate and raises you to the ceiling with just enough airtime to land on a tiny piece of the terminal, allowing you to jump on top of the machine. Meaning I could finally input the code to start the water purifier and end the run with completely no equip load. In the words of the almighty Todd Howard, it just works. Please, for the love of God, don't attempt this. Playing as a baby is one of the worst things you can do to yourself, especially when you restrict not being able to use anything at all. I got to the point where I could fast travel no problem after a lot of trial and effort, but that seemed to be the only screen I ever got to work on my Pip-Boy. But at least I can say it's done, and I can never touch it ever again. Depending on where you draw the line with your challenge runs, this run is either incredibly doable, impossible, or a nightmare to complete. But I'll leave that to you, as in my book, I'm marking this as totally doable. If you liked what you saw, please make sure to like the video and consider subscribing, as it helps the channel out a ton. If you have a challenge you'd like to suggest, leave it in the comments below. I play all sorts of games, so no challenge is off the table. I want to thank all of you that have watched up to this point, and as always, I have been Chris from Crisis Gaming, and I will see you on the next one.